Hello, everyone, and welcome to From Fact to Fiction. Today, our guest is Andrew Diamond. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Andrew writes mystery, crime, noir, and an occasional comedy. You have 11 books now.
Yeah,
That's a feature cinematic prose, strong characterization, twisting plots, and dark humor. Um, you're educated in English literature, but
yes.
self-taught as a software engineer. That's how Andrew spent his career. Writing software in many areas, including for libraries, healthcare, travel booking companies, and electric utilities.
Hmm.
That gave you a good perspective on all of those different processes and supporting systems works. I also spent my career in software, but as a data scientist. And so
Oh,
I get
nice.
that. It's very important. You can't write software to do something if you don't understand how it works.
Right, right.
So
Or what the users want to get out of it.
yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that gives you a great insight and lots of information to write great fiction about, right?
yeah,
And in
yeah,
fact, the book we're going to talk about today is Grid Zero, your new book that just came out, and it addresses the fragility in our electric utilities.
yes.
So, when the book started, Andrew, I almost couldn't read it because I had just been through Hurricane Helene, right?
Oh,
We were in
right.
it, and I thought, oh my gosh, it was so spot on and so close to it. And thank goodness it just was. If, like I said, if this is about the trials and tribulations of recurring from a hurricane, I don't know if I can do it. But fortunately, you took us on to a great conspiracy and a great thrill ride. And so anyway, it was great. And it became, I thought was interesting, it became very obvious that hurricanes are not the only threat to our standard of living and to our fragile electrical grid. And in the book, we have a conspiracy to take down the grids uncovered, not by the government, but our very unlikely hero who has
Yes.
them do something. So,
Yeah, an unlikely and intelligent and kind of obsessive hero.
yes,
Um, I guess one of the fundamental characteristics of a sleuth, whether they are a detective by profession or just a sleuth by temperament, is this inability to let go of a question. Something piques your curiosity, and you just have to figure out what it's all about, even if it leads you into trouble.
right.
And that's what happens with Sean in Grid Zero.
And do you want to tell us a little bit more about Grid Zero? No spoilers, though. Okay.
Yeah, so the book opens with it opens in a small town in Virginia, and we are seeing people living in the aftermath of back-to-back hurricanes that have temporarily knocked out power to the entire state, even beyond the state of Virginia. And it gives people a taste of how many things we rely on coming from electricity, our heat and air conditioning, being able to keep food in the fridge, being able to cook food, even electricity powers the gas pumps that fuel our cars. And when it goes out, pretty much everything in life changes. So we have this view of what it's like to live without electricity. And Sean is a former software engineer with the state electric utility. And while he was there, he came across something in the software code that runs the grid that didn't look right to him. And he kind of obsesses about this, and he wants to get to the bottom of why is this strange code in software that runs the grid, software that is so important to the functioning of society. What is this strange code doing there? Um, so that's sort of what gets the ball rolling. Um, and Sean is quite a determined investigator, determined even to the point where maybe sometimes he doesn't make the most intelligent decisions, but he has this sort of single-minded focus on figuring out the problem.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
You also have some other great characters. In fact, I loved that it took me quite a while to actually figure out Sean was the main character. I couldn't tell if it was Danielle, his who becomes his girlfriend, or maybe Dell, who's a electric utility guy,
Yeah,
which I loved, which is great because they were so deep. Right?
yeah. So I I've written a number of other novels. They're almost always told from a single perspective, from the perspective of the main character. And I had written the third book in another series from that limited kind of one character point of view. And I got frustrated because I wanted to tell a more complicated story. Um, that actually would require the perspectives of multiple different characters.
Mhm.
So I put that other book aside and I started working on Grid Zero. And I think at the time I started the book, I was actually working as a contractor for the electric company.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't fully understood how the grid worked before
Mhm.
doing this work for the electric company, but I had to learn. And I was fascinated both by the complexity of it and the fragility of it. It's so complex that it's a wonder to me that it works at all. Um, and while I was working there, I I started thinking, well, what would happen if this all went out? It would take some work because um, the grid has so many safeguards built into it. I mean, it is built from the ground up with the idea of preventing catastrophic failure. But that still could happen, and it has happened. Stephen King once said that he starts every book with this question, what if? Like, what if I take this person and stick them in that situation? What would happen? And he doesn't really know until he writes it. Um, and that's the same thing I did with Grid Zero. I was like, well, what if I take this handful of people
Mhm.
and throw them in this situation? And I have a good idea of like, if you want to cause havoc in the grid, I kind of know how that would happen, what you would have to do. So what if I took this group of people and put them in this situation? How would it play out? And the result is that book. And yeah, Sean was intended to be the main character. Danielle grew to be a much more interesting character than I had originally anticipated. And she actually turned out to be my favorite character in that book. And a lot of readers have said the same thing. Um,
Mhm.
but it's funny how when you're not necessarily trying to focus on one character as a writer, because there's no pressure to make them into anything in particular, they can just sort of become something that you didn't expect.
Absolutely.
And that happened with her, and I still have a soft spot for her.
Nice. We talk about the facts behind the fiction and what in specialty thrillers and what inspired them and how much is true, how much is made up, and all helps with the scare factor. So
Yeah.
I would love to start, say, by asking you if you could tell us a little bit more about the real life events that inspired your book.
Yeah. So regarding the actual blackout itself, or the plot to cause one, um, there was a blackout in 2003. It was actually the largest in American history, and it affected part of the Midwest, most of the East, and even some Canadian provinces. It was a blackout that started in the state of Ohio when the utility was running too much power through some lines near Cleveland on a very hot summer day. And in fact, all power equipment is rated for heat. And the hotter the weather, the less electricity you can actually run through the lines. The electricity causes those lines to get very hot, and the larger lines are running about 500,000 volts of electricity, which can get
Wow.
extremely hot.
Yeah.
So in summer, the electrical companies have this problem where they have to uh, provide more electricity to support everyone's air conditioners, which are very power hungry. But they have to be careful not to run too much power through the wires. When those wires get very hot, they start to sag. Um, they get too hot, they'll actually melt. But typically, before then, they will sag. And if the power companies haven't cleared enough room under the power lines, they'll touch something and ground out. And
Mhm.
um, then that trips all of these breakers and other equipment to prevent a power surge from destroying the rest of the grid. So what happened in Ohio in 2003 was that there was a bug in their monitoring software that caused the control center at First Energy, caused the engineers in there not to be able to see how much power was actually going through the lines, and
Oh,
that
really?
some of these lines were getting overloaded.
Yeah.
So one of the lines in Cleveland got too hot, sagged, touched a tree branch, and ground it out. That tripped all these breakers to prevent damage down the rest of that line. So now that line was out of commission and the electricity got routed to other lines, which is standard. But then in the heat, all those other lines became overvolted. They started to sag and touch things and ground out. And then the entire Ohio grid uh, collapsed.
Wow.
And because that grid was connected to the grids in other states, the disappearance of all the electricity in Ohio was like this black hole in the middle of the grid. And all of the other states surrounding Ohio collapsed as well.
How did that happen? How did they all collapse as well?
Electricity is like water, it will flow, wherever it can. If you have the state of Ohio in the middle and it's connected to all these other grids, and all the electricity disappears in that state, it's almost like a vacuum. The electricity from the other states will come in,
Oh,
will flow
wow.
in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that actually caused a
Wow.
surge in the surrounding states, and it caused all their breakers to trip.
Wow.
Um, but this happened because the control center, because of a computer bug, the control center
Mhm.
in Ohio could not see what was really happening on their own grid. They started getting calls from other states from that were alarmed.
Oh.
Um, but it took down everything for 50 million people. I think it took about 2 days for um,
Hmm.
most of that power to be restored. But that shows a type of fragility when you see that a
Mhm.
bug in one system
Yeah.
that blinds the operators to one area of the grid. When a bug like that can cause a cascading catastrophic failure, that shows some definite fragility, and it does exist
Wow.
in the grid. That kind of fragility does exist. Um,
Gosh. Yeah, I noticed as you talk through it, it strikes me that this trifecta of you've got the software, the infrastructure itself, and then the people operating
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and all these 3 points of failure. And of course, in your book, you hit all of them get hit up.
yeah,
But there's anyway, you can poke any one of them, but when you get all three of them, it's especially catastrophic.
yeah,
So, so in my career in software, in legacy systems, I saw that they were old systems, as I imagine the electric grid is. They kept kind of cobbling things together.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you had different, trying to integrate different languages, different platform, different vendors. And
yeah.
so that makes it fragile, especially at the touch points. Does anything like that happen in the electric utilities as well?
Um, there is a lot of patchwork
Uh,
stuff in there. Yeah. And the systems are extremely complex.
Mm-hmm.
They're very well guarded. The level of security at an electric utility is extremely high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the systems being secured definitely do have some fragility. They have evolved over many, many decades, and they include hardware and software from many different vendors.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and as I said, after working there, I'm impressed that they can actually keep the grid running as well as they do. Because I know, I've worked on other complex systems, but I would have to say that is the most complex I've seen.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, so because security is so tight and restrictions are so high, it would be quite difficult for someone to sabotage the
Mhm.
system. They would have to know really what they're doing,
Mhm.
what parts of the system they need access to. Um, it would take a considerable amount of work and forethought.
Mhm.
You'd have to be pretty determined.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Um,
Those systems are ultimately they are vulnerable. And if you look at the Stuxnet attack, have you ever heard of that? That
I,
was when I think it was the US and Israel um, produced some software to try to destroy the centrifuges that Iran was using um, to produce purified uranium for weapons use. And they made this software that actually would go out and it would get onto any system that it infected, and it would start to look around at the system for certain characteristics, like are certain types of devices attached to it. It was looking for centrifuges in particular. And if it finds those devices, then it knows it's in the right place to do its work. If it doesn't find them, it just quietly deletes itself.
wow.
So Stuxnet was extremely sophisticated in that, it figured out what environment it was running in. It figured out that these centrifuges were attached to some central computer, and then it went and spun up the centrifuges to such high speeds that they destroyed themselves.
Wow.
And it did all this silently. And I think at the time, and maybe even now, it is one of the most sophisticated pieces of malware ever constructed.
Wow.
But that's the sort of thing you could build to try to sabotage a system that's managed by industrial control software.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Moving along to the people side of the weakness, seems like unlike a lot of companies where data gets lost through phishing scams that happen every day, that at least the grid seems more protected from things like that because an individual person has to get so much. There's so many layers of
Yeah.
safeguard between the person and the.
And they're targeted for phishing all the time. In fact, if you work there, one of the things they do is send you fake phishing messages just to see if you'll click on them.
Mm.
And they uh, have mandatory training that you have to go through repeat every few months
Wow.
to make sure that you can recognize phishing emails and protocols of how to not respond to them or how to try to verify them.
Wow.
Yeah, they're under constant attack
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because
Mm.
they're a juicy target, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So,
But I think also just inherent in modern life is we now depend on these systems that are so complex that there is no one person who understands all of a system. Um, and you know, and you see this all the time in software where
Mhm.
these systems are incredibly complex and some lone hacker poking around finds some little crack, some little way to get in. Um, and when they find that, they can do tremendous damage. There's a saying among computer security professionals that we have to be right 100% of the time, and our opponents, the hackers, only have to be right once,
Yeah. Yeah.
for to cause trouble for us.
Mm.
Um, and that's happening everywhere all the time.
Wow. that up. So let's wrap it up and then summarize the facts behind the fiction of Grid Zero. What do you think? Could it happen? Theoretically likely, but probably not. Or is this a real risk
Oh,
that we pose every day? That's
I think it's a real risk.
a risk.
Yeah, and I think um, realistically, it would be a foreign nation. Um, if we got into a war,
Mm,
uh, foreign nation, our enemies understand that they could shut down much of our daily life and our ability to function by shutting down the grid. And given Stuxnet and how sophisticated that was, um, I think that other nations could, if they haven't already,
mm,
come up with something as sophisticated to damage, destroy, or disable our power grid.
mm,
And you think about the consequences of that in wartime,
mm,
like we can't produce the things that we would need for war. It would cause all sorts of civil unrest in the
mhm.
country. When people can't get food, they can't fuel their cars or heat their homes. So that's why the utilities are such a target, why they're under constant attack. It's big players who mean to do real harm.
Yeah. And I learned from reading your book that physical harm. I thought, you could shut something down, but it's really so easy to destroy the actual physical infrastructure, and that
Right.
the damage would take a long time to
A
work.
very long time. A lot of those components, particularly the large transformers, are custom built, and the lead time to get a new one built might be 18 months or 2 years. So that's a considerable outage.
Uh-huh. Well, thank you again so much for coming and talking to us, and hope that you'll come back another time and talk to us about some of your other books, or it
Sure.
would be super great to have you come back again sometime
All
else.
right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. All right, great. And thanks everyone for joining us at From Fact to Fiction. And we hope you have a great day.